Now we'll be creating a style guide. We want to look at our color palette, typography, iconography, and our grid system. Now the first thing is color palette. So let's assume you want to design a product and you want to pick your colors. You can pick up to 3 colors or 4, but it's advisable to maintain a minimum of 2 colors and a maximum of 3 colors. Now to create what we call a color palette is just choosing the colors you want to use for your design. Now this is easier if your client has a brand guideline with their already made colors, but since they don't in this case, we are going to choose our colors ourselves. So first you create a rectangle on this frame that you've created and then pick the color you want. So if you have a color code, you could likely just put your color code and it will give you a color. We're going to use a blue. We will use this for our first color, which we call the primary color. So when we call it primary color, what it means is that this is the dominant color, the main color that we are going to use. Now, I'll copy this, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, move it to the side, and possibly choose another color, maybe something close to orange, close to yellow rather, and call it as secondary color. Now this means this color is going to be used for secondary options. Maybe we want to highlight something without making it so obvious. That's where we use secondary color. Now there are other colors we could also add. We call them tertiary colors. So these are colors that we might not use, but they are just there because they might likely come in handy. So we call it tertiary colors. Now, most times tertiary colors are mostly gray because you might likely be using them for some text. So that being said, we still have our normal colors like black and white. Those ones are default. You don't have to add them to your style guide. Now, this is our color palette. So it means if I'm designing a product, these are the colors I'm going to use. The next thing we are moving on to is typography. So I'm going to type the first thing, which is this is my header 1. So in typography, you already know that when building a product, most texts are bigger than some text. So we categorize them into headers and body text. So I can say this is my header 1 and the number is 56. And I give it 56 and make it bold. And then I can duplicate this, Ctrl Z, Ctrl V, and say this is my header 2. Now, based on how I design, I use multiples of 8. So if I take 8 out of 56, it's going to be 48. So I can just say this is 48. And then duplicate this again. And then, of course, the next one is 40. And then it goes and say this is my header 3. And then it goes on, and I can say this is my header 4. And then minus 8 from 40, you're going to get 32. So I can say these are my headers. All right. Then for my body, I can just duplicate these guys. Duplicate them. Take them from bold to regular. And then I can just still maintain the sizing, or I can decide to change the sizing. It's up to you. Now, when it comes to sizing for typography, Most people use multiples of 4, and some people use multiples of 8. Now, why this is important is so you don't have decimal points when you're scaling your design. So if you're starting with your header 1 being 56, you just deduct 8 from the number as it goes down. If your body text starts from 32, you just deduct 8 or 4, depending on what you're using, as it goes down. I hope you understand that. Now, let's move over to iconography. Iconography talks about the icons that you'll be using all through your design. So if you're going to be using an icon like profile, you know that profiles look more like a sketch of a human head. So you either want to create that yourself or you want to use what we call plugins. Now, plugins make it so simple and make it faster. However, we are going to use both in this case. So to do it yourself, you could just come to the shape, choose ellipse, and draw a small circle, and then pick rectangle 2 and draw a box around it. Now, when you draw a box around it, it has sharp edges. Now, when you draw shapes, there's something called nodes. And nodes are like the 4 elements that shows here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Also, by the property panel, which is on your right, you have a corner radius option. Changing this thing is going to affect these sharp edges and they will become curved edges. So let's try it. Let's change it to 32. Now this is what we will have. But this is not really what we are looking for. So let's go back, Ctrl Z. And then we want to just curve here, this top right and the top left. Now go to your property panel, just close to the radius option, you will see independent corners. When you click there, it shows all 4 sides. Now mostly the top left and the top right is the first. So we want to make that about 100 by 100. 100 by 100, not 200, please. And then we'll have something like this. Then we can adjust it. And we've created our profile icon. So you can drop this icon here and also create more icons, depending on how good you are with creating shapes. However, like I said, we are also going to check the plugin option. So for plugin, you can go to File, and then you will see plugin, and then go to Find More plugin. But that is a longer process. So if you go to the top here, top left, you will see Resources panel. If you click on your Resources panel and click on Plugin, you can search for the plugin you want. In this case, I'm going to use a plugin named Iconify. It gives you different icons that you search for. Now you click on Run, and then it's going to open a modal for you, a tab. And then you can search for profile. Now, once you do that, it's going to give you different type of profile faces that you can use. So you can pick from anyone. So we are just going to pick one and then click on import icon. So when you click on import icon, you can close this panel and it will paste on your Figma board. And there we have it. You can search for as many as you want. It's different from what we've created, but whichever one is your preference, you can go with it. Now, the last thing we want to do there is grid system. So I'm just going to create another frame. Now I'm not choosing desktop or mobile, it's just a freehand frame. And then we'll talk about grid system. Now, what is grid system? Grid system is a system that allows you create grids around your design to help with alignment. Remember when we explored Figma, we saw on the property panel the grid system. Now, how does it work? First of all, to create a grid system, you have to click on your frame, and then you're going to see on the property panel the layout grid. Now, when you click on the plus there, it creates a grid system for you. Now, looking at this is looking like a graph sheet, and that's not what you want to do. If you come to the grid, the property panel where you have the grid pixel, and you click on the first grid settings there, which has little dots, you will see an option to change your grid type. So changing grid type, we are using columns because we want a column grid first. Now, when you click on column grid, by default, it's going to create a 5-column grid system. Now, in setting up your grid, there's something we call margin and gutter. Now, the margin talks about the distance between the end of your design to where you want your design to start from. The end of your frame, rather, to where you want your design to start from. Now, for desktop, I use a margin of 90 to 100. It's advisable so when your product is developed, you don't have issues with design going outside your screen. So for my count, I'm going to use 8 because I want an 8-column grid to show here. And then for my margin, I'm going to use 90, right? And then for my gutter, so gutter talks about the distance between one column to another, which is this red line to another. I'm going to use 24 because I love using the multiples of 8, or I'm going to use 40. Now, what this does to you is, imagine you want to design something on this, and then you write a text and say, this is my first page. Sorry, first place. This is my first page. Now, if you move around, you discover that your design or your write-up is snapping to this grid. So if you're going to start your design, you have to start from where the red starts from. So that means everything you're going to be doing has to be aligned to that place. Now, what this does is it keeps your design neat and aligned properly. So you don't have to always check your alignment to see if it's straight or not, because your grid is helping you keep it in check. Now, for the gutter, which is the space between one column to another, let's assume you want to put an image, and then you also want to add a write-up. So it tells you that you can start your write-up from here, which means the distance between your image and your write-up is 40. And that will help you align your write-ups properly. So you don't always check the distance between your text and your image. Now, when you create this grid, it means you can apply the grid to all your design as you go on. Now, when you're designing, you can come here and pick your colors or your text. As we go further, we'll look at how to make style guide easier and turn them to a style, which makes your work faster and better.